In this video, I'm going to introduce data types and variables in Python. So first we'll talk about literal values. Well, a literal value is any raw data value that you want to use in your program. Some common literal values that we often use are whole numbers, fractional numbers, printable characters. There are many other types of values that we can use, but numeric values and printable character values, those are very common values that we want to do work with. A data type helps us distinguish how to interpret and interact with a literal value. So for example, a number value, you may be able to divide number values together, but you can't divide text values together. So the data type, if we associate a specific data type with a value, then we can help the program know how to interact with those values. So some of the common types of literal values we're going to be working with and their associated data types are as follows. When we want to work with whole number values, we are going to use the data type integer. So an integer describes a whole number value. We can look at the type int here. If we want to work with decimal numbers, then we will associate those with the data type float. So float represents numbers with decimal portions. And then finally, if we want to work with a string value, printable character values, we are going to represent that with the data type string. So a string represents printable characters. Now, a little bit more about an integer in Python. If you are familiar with, if you have programmed in other languages, a lot of the time the integer types or the whole number data types, they have specific sizes. And for example, an int in C# can only hold values up to, or whole number values up to plus or minus 2 billion and a little bit more. But in Python, the integer in Python has no maximum size. So you can store very large integer values in Python. And a little bit more about a string. To differentiate a string of text, a value string of text, from text that represents a keyword or represents an identifier in Python, we have to enclose the string literal value inside a pair of quotes. Either double quotes or single quotes will work as well. So if I have a string of characters without any quotations around them, then we can interpret this as an identifier or a keyword in our program. But once we put a pair of double quotes around this text, it becomes something, it becomes data. It becomes something we can work with. So these are hello with double quotes and hello with single quotes. These both represent a string literal value. Let's talk about variables. Often when we write our programs, we want to not only manipulate values, but we will want to store them so that we can manipulate them later. We want to save data in our program. In order to store a value in your program, you have to create a variable and put the data into a variable. So a variable is named storage for your values. To create a variable, we can use any valid identifier name to name the variable. In order to assign a value into the variable, we are going to use the assignment operator, which is a single equal sign. The assignment operator is how we store a value into a variable. Now, assignment always goes from right to left. So the syntax in Python is variable equals some value. Let's look at some examples. Here I have a variable named age, and I'm storing the integer value 20 into the variable age. So if we were to visualize this, we could imagine that this variable age is a storage location. Maybe we can think of it as a box. And it has a name. The box's name is age. And into that box, we're putting the value 20. So we're storing a value into the variable. Now some more examples here. I'm putting the floating point, the float value, 3.1415, into the variable GPA. We use the assignment operator to store the value into the variable. In the next example, I'm storing the string of text Hagrid into the variable named name. Notice there are no quotes around name because name is an identifier. It is a variable. But I do have double quotes around Hagrid to show that Hagrid is a string of text. It is a literal string value. Now, Python is a loosely typed language. What that means is that any variable in Python can hold any value of any data type at any time. So if I make a little box variable named age, I can store an integer value into that variable, and then later I could put a floating point value into that variable, and then later I could put a string value into that variable. Now every time I put a new value into the variable, the old value is overwritten, as we'll see in a moment. But a variable in Python can hold any type of data at any time. Let's do some really quick examples here. So I have a Jupyter Notebook set up. Let's create a variable named age. So age, and I want to put the value 20 inside the variable. Okay, I've stored a value into the variable age. Now if I want to reference this value at a later time, let's go ahead and print the age. I'm not printing the identifier name here. I'm not printing the variable name. I'm going to print the value that is stored into the variable. And then if I store a different value, here I'm going to say, first I'm going to put the value 20 into the variable age, and then I'm going to override that value with a new value, the string value Hagrid, and put that into the variable age. When I do that, when I go and print age, notice that now I'm printing Hagrid. So when I interact with a variable, I'm going to interact with the last value that was stored inside it. Now here I'm going to say age is equal to, let's make this 20.5, just to show we can put a floating point value in there. And then I'm going to put a value called, or make a variable called year, and I will assign the value, the integer value 1 into the variable year. And now I'm going to print the year value plus the age value. So I'm doing work upon variable names, but when I do this work, I'm going to be using the values stored into the variables. So the variables are references for the values in which they hold. So when I run this and I print what's year plus age, the last value stored in age was 20.5. The last value stored in the variable year was 1, and so when I add the value in 1 plus the value, or the value in year plus the value in age, I get the value 21.5, and we see that happen. So variables are used to hold values.